the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root, from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site. And I'm not going to number this episode because I don't know which one it'll be actually released, but we have another of our 14 opponent preview shows as we enter the 2023 season. We're almost at training camp. It's something we've been doing the last several years is in July before training camp starts is kind of hitting up the NFL Wire writers or editors to our sister sites for all the teams that the Cardinals are facing in 2023. And in this episode, we've got Steelers Wire managing editor Curt Popejoy, a guy who's been on the NFL Wire as long as I have. So we've been there a while. I've been here since 2016. Curt, you've been in there. Were you on with Neil from the beginning or soon thereafter?
December of 2015, he hired me on. So yeah.
So Curt is one of the few on the network who's been there longer than I have, which is pretty impressive. It's a good gig, and we get to do things that we love, talk about and write about our teams. So Curt, welcome to the show. I believe this is the first time I've had you on because the Cardinals have not played the Steelers in a hot minute.
Rip. Yep. I'm looking forward to it though. Yeah. I always like to see new teams on the schedule. So yeah, I'm good with it.
And the one thing that is changing with the 17 game schedule, it means we get an extra other conference matchup, which does mix things up a little bit instead of just the once every 4 years, which means you don't really know much about that other team, which is the Cardinals and the Steelers had a connection for a long time out, of course, because they went from Ken Whisenhunt to Bruce Arians, and late 2000s. Whisenhunt made it basically Steelers West. Arians did it to some extent. He bought some guys over but they had coaches and players. So there's been a connection between the two franchises for quite some time, a little bit less now. So what we want to kind of talk about, Curt, in this show is basically kind of run down what happened last season, look at what's happened this offseason, and kind of the outlook for 2023. The Steelers, I don't know how they managed to pull it off, but after a bad start, they managed to keep Mike Tomlin's streak of winning seasons, finished 9-8. How would you say that they performed based on expectations last season?
I think the first half of the year they played pretty much exactly the way people expected first year post Ben Roethlisberger. I think that with Ben retiring, I think most fans, even prior to drafting Kenny Pickett, felt like the team was going to take a step back. You didn't really know what you were going to get. They signed Mitch Trubisky day one of free agency. At that point, there was a lot of speculation. Are they even going to bother to draft a quarterback high in the draft? Or are they so high on Trubisky that they were just going to kind of roll with him? And then when they drafted Pickett, then it became kind of a controversy. Who's going to start? Who's going to play? Took about 3 games before the coaches realized they may as well get Pickett out there because the offense wasn't going to move with Trubisky, at quarterback. And Pickett looked terrible. I mean, he looked terrible in the beginning. He was throwing interceptions, threw a ton of picks before the bye week. Whatever happened at the bye week, they sort of righted the ship. Pickett became way more efficient with the football. He didn't throw a ton. He didn't throw for any big game. I don't think he had a 300-yard passing game all year. But he only threw 2 interceptions in the second half of the year. Najee Harris kind of recommitted himself to his running style. Pittsburgh found a way to get Jaylen Warren involved in the run game. They got TJ Watt back. And things I think they kind of outplayed, I think what a lot of people expected to still be in the playoff mix. last week of the season after the way they started and without Ben Roethlisberger, I don't care how diehard you are. That was not something that I think most fans went into the season thinking we're still going to have a chance to make the playoffs the last game of the season. No way. No way.
No, that's very reasonable. So if you look at the Pickett's first season, and for some reason, he ended up falling a little bit in the draft. Depending that quarterback situation there in the draft was interesting, though. Didn't it always feel like Kenny Pickett to the Steelers was meant to be?
They have a pick of destiny every year. It seems like every year.
We'll get to that obviously because this year is Joey Porter.
Yeah. Well, and last year there were two. I mean, Connor Hayward, had to draft Cam Hayward's brother. There's just these picks that are kind of meant to be, and you hope they work. So yeah, no doubt.
So, after 1 year, you saw terrible Kenny Pickett. You saw efficient Kenny Pickett. How confident are you that he is the quarterback of the future? I mean, we can't say the next Ben Roethlisberger. That's completely unfair to put on a guy. But is he a guy that you can see the team rolling forward with? Is he a franchise-style quarterback based on what you've seen just in one season?
I have far more confidence in Kenny Pickett than I do our offensive coordinator at this point. I really think that Pickett has skills, 2 or 3 game-winning drives at the end of the season, kind of took control of the passing game, made some moves. I am not at all convinced that Matt Canada is going to put him in a position to be that guy, at least not this year. I think this year it's going to be, we got 2 good running backs. We beefed up our offensive line. We're going to take all the pressure off Pickett. We're going to make him be kind of a game manager. We're going to run. And then if we need you to throw, we'll have you throw. And I know a lot of fans don't like that mentality anymore. The NFL is geared around points and scoring, and the AFC North is just stacked with quarterbacks and playmakers. And, a lot of people wonder, are they going to be able to get into a shootout with the Bengals? If they kind of hold Pickett back schematically, is he going to be able to be the guy that can come out and throw, go throw for throw with Burrow? I don't know. I don't know that the scheme is going to let him do that. But I do have a lot of confidence in him. I think that, I'm an old guy. I've been watching the Steelers a long time. I got no problem with some old school football where they run the ball.
And that's basically how they started Roethlisberger's career as well.
Right. They had Zaraway and Bettis, and, you just had all these guys and they just lined it up and threw off play action and did those kinds of things. I'm okay with that if that's what they want to do. But eventually they're going to need him. They're going to fall behind. They're going to need him to make some throws. I think he can make the throws. I just am not sure that Matt Canada is going to put him in a position. And they got plenty of skill players. But is he gonna be okay with this dink and dunk, jet sweep, 0 yardage throws? I don't like that personally in today's NFL. I think it's really tough to be consistently successful like that. So I have confidence that Kenny Pickett's the quarterback of the future. I'm not at all convinced Matt Canada is the offensive coordinator of the future. So
TJ Watt came back from his injury. The numbers are astounding in terms of win-loss. The difference between TJ Watt on the field and TJ Watt not on the field. Was that a big reason for the turnaround towards the end of the season, is just getting him back on the field?
That was huge because, Steelers fans remember Troy Polamalu, and it was kind of the same effect when Troy would get hurt. Troy kind of played with reckless abandon. He'd miss some games with some injuries, and the whole defense just floundered when he wasn't on the field. They didn't have that guy who could do all those things, and so everybody kind of had to assume different roles, and sometimes they weren't terribly comfortable in those roles, and the whole defense suffered because of it. And I think we saw that last year when TJ Watt went on IR. Alex Highsmith had a huge year, 14 and a half sacks. He didn't get those sacks when Watt was gone. I think that's kind of a misconception, is that he stepped his game up, but he only had 3 sacks while Watt was out. He benefited from having Watt on the field, not the other way around. He didn't, everybody played better when he was there. the whole defense. Minkah Fitzpatrick's role has to change when Watt's not on the field. When he's allowed to kind of be that free roaming safety, he's probably the best in the NFL. When he's not allowed to do that and has to step up and run support and do all those things, the whole secondary is not as good. And I think that's what we saw last year was the impact of not having Watt on the field. I said he's the MVP of the team. I mean, he's the most, in terms of value, you said it, the numbers bear it out. When he's on the field, they win. When he's not on the field, they don't win. And that's the definition of value when it comes right down to it.
I was listening to J.J. Watt, who retired this offseason after 2 years with the Cardinals, and he was talking about, obviously the Watt family is an incredibly tight family brotherhood-wise, and he said he's had conversation with TJ because they are all, for probably lack of it, overtrain in the offseason, but it's what's got them to the level that they're at. But TJ, he said there's a conversation he has with TJ to kind of, okay, you might need to, what's a little bit better? Do you need to put that extra 5 pounds on your rack there to continue to train at that high level? Because that's, JJ he trained and trained, which got him to that point in his career where he's the best in the NFL for several seasons, but he wonders how much of that contributed to his body breaking down later on his career,
right.
Which is something he doesn't want to see happen to his brother, and obviously Steelers fans don't want to see happen to TJ.
No, but do you want the best edge in the league for 5 years and then his career not quite as long, or do you want like a top 10 edge for 7 years? That's the trade-off, and I think those guys do have that mentality. I think Watt wants to be the best for as long as he can, and when he can't be the best, he won't be anymore. I think JJ was kind of the same way. I think he was just I'm going to be the best defensive end in the NFL, and if I can't be, then I'm not. The second on doesn't really matter to me. So
and he said would I have, if I thought about it now, would I have even listened if someone told me that? Because what I was doing got me to the top of the NFL. So you probably should pull back. But why? This is what got me here.
Why? Yeah. Why would you do that? Yeah. Exactly right. Exactly right.
So coming up next on the Rise Up C Red podcast, the best our Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move to the offseason. What's happened with the Steelers this offseason, and how will they to compete in what is an incredibly competitive AFC North? That's coming up next on Rise Up C Red. We're back on the Rise Up C Red podcast, the best our Cardinals talk on the web, talking with Curt Popejoy from SteelersWire.com. Now moving on to the offseason. Let's talk free agency. Did the Steelers have any big or impactful free agent losses, and whom did they add to help Pickett and company?
I think the biggest move that most people talk about was adding Patrick Peterson at cornerback. I think most Steelers fans loved Cameron Sutton, and he was one of the few cornerbacks that the Steelers drafted and developed, and he turned into a really good number one for him last year. But he moved on. I think getting Peterson in there was a huge move for the secondary as sort of a stopgap, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. They completely gutted out their inside linebacker depth chart. They had 3 inside linebackers they rotated through last year. 2 of them they didn't even try to re-sign, and one they released. Miles Jack's gone, Devin Bush is gone, Robert Spillane's gone. They brought in 2 veterans. They brought in Cole Holcomb from Washington and Landon Roberts from the Dolphins. I think it's still probably the weakest position on the team. I'm not sure they improved that position markedly at all. If Cole Holcomb's foot's completely healed, he's probably more athletic than Miles Jack, but they're still searching for the next Ryan Shazier. They have not been able to replace Ryan Shazier since he left. They have tried the draft, they tried free agency, nothing's worked. On offense, they continued to build the offensive line. They brought in Isaac Seumalo from the Eagles to play left guard. I think that's huge. I think that ultimately is probably going to be the biggest free agent move they made. I think he really solidifies the offensive line, gives them a really strong interior offensive line. They added some other pieces, Allen Robinson, wide receiver, give him kind of that veteran guy to work with the younger receivers, play some slot receiver, allow Deontay Johnson to move inside some. But yeah, it was busy. This was Omar Khan's kind of first full off season as the general manager. That strange situation last year where he was hired as the GM, but Kevin Colbert chose not to resign until after the draft. So it was a really weird situation. He didn't get to have a full off season. And I mean, this year they've been really aggressive and they've made moves and they've brought in guys. It's one of those situations where I think that they targeted their areas that they knew they needed to upgrade. I think in their mind, they did upgrade those positions. Remains to be seen whether or not, getting Marcus Golden as a third outside linebacker, as a pass rusher, I think that was huge. I think late in the offseason, that was big. I was really, really hoping they would add a veteran. And again, that's another position where they've struggled to find that third edge rusher. They've tried veterans and the veterans have failed. It just hasn't worked. I'm very excited about having Marcus Golden on the team. I think he sounds like he's saying all the right things. He's okay with being a rotational guy. He's happy playing behind Watt and Highsmith, and that can only help because the Steelers had their worst year rushing the passer they've had in about 7 years. So I'm good with that one too. They sprinkled in 4 or 5 guys that I think are going to start, and I think are going to play well for them. I think the underrated Keanu Neal, the safety they brought in, another guy that I think a lot of people weren't really thinking about safety as a need. Sounds like he's going to get some pretty serious reps. I mean, the way he talks, and he can provide some versatility. So I'm good with that. Anything that can make a Fitzpatrick's job easier and give him more freedom, I'm all for that. So yeah, they've made some moves in free agency, probably the busiest offseason they've had in a long time in terms of free agency.
Patrick Peterson is an interesting guy. Obviously, he played a decade with the Cardinals, and what we saw at the end of his Cardinals career is that he could still be that guy, but not. His ceiling was still the same ceiling it always was, but the floor dropped, and there were games that he looked bad. He's whether it's maybe it was the different schematic change going to Mike Zimmer's defense early, or going to the Vikings and that defensive scheme. It was obviously Zimmer first that was there, and he kind of reinvented himself. I don't know if it's a reinvent or just being put in better positions rather than be the you play cat defense, you cover that cat the whole game, which he did most of the time in Arizona. He'd right. Take on the number one receiver, follow him around the field. But do fans still view Patrick Peterson do they view him as a top guy or as a really good complementary piece?
Right. I think that's what they're looking at. I think they're looking at him. Honestly, I think a lot of fans are excited about his ability to come in and kind of mentor the young guys that they brought in. I think that with the draft, I know we're going to talk about the draft a little bit. Pittsburgh made some moves to kind of build for the future at cornerback, and I think that Peterson seems excited about the idea of working with these guys. He's also, during minicamp, he spent some time at safety.
Mm-hmm. That felt inevitable based on his size when he entered the league. But even as a few years ago, he was open to the possibility of playing some safety. But I think at this point of his career, he'd make a fantastic safety if he is willing to tackle, because that's not one of his things.
Right. That's what that's always kind of been a thing that's hung over his head. For all his skills, he was never.
He can do it, but he's not a willing tackler usually.
He makes a lot of business decisions out there on the field. So yeah. Steelers have had defensive backs like that before, making business decisions out there when it comes to tackling running backs. So I get that, but the Steelers still have Levi Wallace on the team, who's a really good cornerback, and I think that they're going to try to figure out ways to get him on the field. And I think seeing Peterson play some safety is probably where they're going to get some of that. So yeah, I don't think anybody thinks, I don't think this is I had a lot of fans reach out to me. Is this a Joe Hayden move? Like when they added Joe Hayden a few years back. I don't think Peterson's got as much left as Hayden did when he came to Pittsburgh. And I think if fans are expecting 6 years out of Peterson, the way Hayden played, they're probably going to be disappointed. I don't expect that. But I think he originally said he wanted to play 2 more years. I think if they can get 2 years out of him, move him between corner and safety, and give Joey Porter and Corey Trice time to learn the game and get better, I think it's a win. I think it's an absolute win.
Let's move on to the draft. Personally, I did like a lot of there are a lot of picks I really like, especially the first four. Broderick Jones in the first round. Incredible. Like he's exciting. He might be the most athletic. He's a freak. Joey Porter, the destiny pick. Obviously, you go from having his dad made a career, basically made a name for himself in the NFL with the Steelers.
He's a legend. Yeah.
Keno Benton, I really liked him as an interior defensive player. And Darnell Washington, that tight end out of Georgia, if he can stay healthy, like what he did at the combine, like he's a guy he can block, but he's got some very underrated catch skills that were underutilized at Georgia. So give us your take. I ran through the first four picks, but what are your expectations for which of these players are going to contribute, who might have important roles in year one, and which are more future picks?
Well, I think you kind of nailed. I think Broderick Jones. I know the Steelers are trying to be very diplomatic with Dan Moore at left tackle, but his days are numbered. I mean, the future is Broderick Jones, and the future at left tackles this year. I know that during minicamp they split reps and they tried to. They don't want to just tell Dan you're done. I mean, even though he said in an interview, you get it when they use a first round pick on a guy that plays your spot, you get it.
It's part of it. It's like DJ Humphries over here in Arizona. Like he's like, yeah, I don't care. None of them's beat me yet.
Yeah. Well, and Moore came in as a fourth or fifth round pick and was pushed into the starting lineup as a rookie when Zach Banner couldn't play late in the offseason, and he played admirably. He really did. His first year, he did everything you could ask of a guy who probably didn't think until August he was going to play any football that year. And so I got no criticisms of Dan Moore. He just didn't come along. Last year he didn't improve. He still too many penalties, too many sacks allowed. So I get it. I still think he probably has a spot on the team. He can play both sides, so that helps. He's young. But I think that Jones is the guy that's going to come in. He's in a great position because, like I said earlier, talking about free agency, with a new left guard who's a veteran and a really great player, he's going to have somebody right next to him who can help him, mentor him. And then you draft his blocking teammate in Darnell Washington, and we've already seen video of those guys at minicamp, like doing combo blocks on people and just plowing people over at minicamp already. And so it's like, okay, we get it. Washington's raw. He's raw as a route runner, but they're going to figure out ways to get him out there as like a sixth offensive lineman. They want to run the ball. He's going to be on the field. Fortunately, Pittsburgh has a couple of really good tight ends, so there's no rush on Washington to make him part of the passing game. So I like that. I like Benton. I think, he said after the draft that Mike Tomlin told him he drafted him to be a bully in the middle of the defensive line, and I think that's a good way to characterize his play style.
Yeah.
But Pittsburgh hasn't had a bully in a while. You got to go back to like Dan McClendon to find the last guy on the team that really kind of pushed people around in there. They've had a lot of athletic guys. Pittsburgh's always been this team that has tried to find kind of clones of one another on the defensive line so they can play them inside, outside. And, you got to probably go back to Casey Hampton to find the last really big nose that they had on the roster. And so I like having Benton in there. I think he's going to be part of a rotation. They brought in Braden Fiocco. They've got Montravius Adams. I think he'll be a nice rotational guy. Obviously Joey Porter, he's one of the stories of the draft. Fell out of the first round, got him at number 32. Was sitting at the draft and didn't get taken, and all those sorts of things. But he's shining at camp. Just an athletic freak. They're gonna figure out a way to get him on the field. I think the kid that's gonna kind of surprise is Corey Trice, the cornerback from Purdue that they got later in the draft. Physically, he's pretty much a match for Porter. He's kind of coming in with a chip on his shoulder, felt like he should have been drafted earlier. So I really like him for the future. I like Nick Herbig as a linebacker for the future. I'm still not convinced he's not going to move inside at some point. I'm not sure he's got the build to hold up on the outside with what Pittsburgh asks of their outside linebackers. But again, they signed his brother Nate in the offseason as a free agent, so you got to draft Nick. I mean, that's just, it's remarkable to me how Pittsburgh all this synergy. I'm still shocked that they haven't re-signed Derek Watt. They're kind of letting Derek Watt leave. I figured that TJ had something in his contract that says, as long as I'm here, you got to keep my brother on the team. But anyway.
Oh, I mean, there's another level to that. Maybe like if he doesn't get signed.
Yeah.
Because you've got the TJ Watt ring. I mean, the JJ Watt Ring of Honor game for the Texans when the Steelers are in town. That was on purpose because TJ's there.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Well, and to even take the conspiracy a step deeper, maybe the reason Derek Watt hasn't been signed is because they're going to move Cam Hayward's brother Connor to fullback this year. I mean, it's just, they've talked about he's talked about going back to playing like a hybrid, like an H-back role. Well, Pittsburgh always carried a true fullback. Maybe they're not going to carry a fullback because Cam Hayward's brother is going to have that spot on the roster. So, it's just layers and layers to everything. So, but yeah, I love the draft. I think it was strong. We didn't talk about Spencer Anderson, athletic interior lineman. I think he's a project guy. But he's a Maryland kid. Tomlin loves his Maryland guys, so wasn't surprised to see them bring one in. But yeah, I think overall it was a great draft. I think you got about 3 guys going to play a lot this year, and I think you've got about 6 guys that are probably going to be in the lineup in the next couple of years. So yeah, I think as they start to transition some older guys out, you're going to see those guys play a lot more.
The Joey Porter pick, there are some that don't love him. But I think he's an athletic freak, who doesn't have, he reminds me, he's like the cornerback version of DK Metcalf, in my opinion, where some of some of the things you want, the hip movement, the change of direction, those are not his strong suits. But DK Metcalf is one heck of a player, and that might end up being, and the NFL bloodlines and all that. But we've only got, let's move on to the last. So coming next in the Rise Up Secret podcast, best of our Cardinals talk on the web. Let's wrap this up talking about the upcoming 2023 season. What are expectations, high end, low end, and how do they see the Cardinals in 2023? That's coming next in Rise Up C-Red. They're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, best of our Cardinals talk on the web. 2023, the AFC North is tough. You've got the Bengals, with Joe Burrow, the team that has been on the top of the conference, more or less. Lamar Jackson returns to the Ravens, and when he's playing, they're good. You've got Deshaun Watson and the Browns that expect to be a playoff team. That is sort of the expectations they have as an organization. And you've got the Steelers with Pickett, and they're still relevant. The Steelers are never bad. But what are the hopes and expectations for this year? What is what fans expect out of this team in 2023?
I think they expect them to go to the playoffs. I think they absolutely, coming that close last year, I absolutely think Steelers fans want to see 10 wins, playoffs. Maybe not the division. I think even the most delusional fans understand that that's Cincinnati's division, and everybody else is playing for second. I think Pittsburgh fans recognize they've had great success against Lamar Jackson, so they can handle them. And the Browns win every offseason. They are the best team on paper every year, but they always find a way to not make it happen when it comes to the regular season. And I think Steelers fans look at that and go, second place in a wild card is ours to take at this point. And I think that's the expectation. I think the bigger picture for them is they want to see Pittsburgh win a playoff game. It's been a long time since Pittsburgh. 2016 is a long time in your playoff life when you're a team that constantly is 500 or above 500. They want to see Pittsburgh win a playoff game this year. And I think that's the ultimate goal for Steelers fans is they are sort of souring on just being close every year. And I think that's what they're expecting.
What do you think, aside from a major injury, say to DJ Watt, to Kenny Pickett, what do you think their reasonable floor as a team this year?
I think 8 wins. I think if they struggle, they're putting a lot of young guys in big spots this year. And I think 8 wins, that would be the first time Tomlin finishes under 500 in his coaching career. But going through the schedule, when I did my predictions, I think I had him picked to go get 10. I think 8 wins is probably the floor. And I think 10 to 11 wins would be huge. And
the Cardinals go to Pittsburgh in December. That's not an ideal time to play Pittsburgh. But it could mean we assume at that point by week 13, Kyler Murray will be back and will probably be fully recovered at that point. Right. I anticipate him getting back about week 6. That's my personal prediction. Based on perception, how is that Cardinals game perceived? A team that is largely considered the worst in the league, playing in Pittsburgh. Is that a game that most say, yeah, that's a win? Do they see it as a potential upset? Or is that, I'm not even going to go to the other route to say, is it a tough game? No, it's probably not a tough game on paper.
Not on paper, but I think Steelers have traditionally struggled against athletic quarterbacks. And I think that Kyler Murray presents a huge challenge if he's healthy and he's playing well. I think that's always been, even in December. I mean, obviously, if the dumps a bunch of snow on the field or whatever, kind of a neutralizer for that athleticism. But I think that ultimately Pittsburgh fans look at games like this and go, yeah, that's a game we should win easily. So there's a real good chance we could lose. Unfortunately, that's kind of been Tomlin's MO. Once or twice a year, they absolutely come out flat in a game they should win easily. And I think late in the year, a lot of it's going to depend on what they've got to play for at that point. Unfortunately, you take on the mindset of your coaches, and if there's still something on the line, I think that's a different matter than if there isn't anything on the line for them. And a lot of it has to do with where the Cardinals are at that point. If the Cardinals are, I don't know, projection-wise, 6 wins, 8 wins, whatever for Arizona. But if they're coming off a win and they're coming in with some momentum, I've seen lots of teams come into Pittsburgh and play with better energy when they probably have no business doing it. And so I take nothing for granted. I've been a Steelers fan for way too long. I take nothing for granted. I've seen them win games they had no business winning and lose games that they should have won so much under Mike Tomlin. At least I can say Bill Cowher, when he was the head coach, he lost the games he should lose and he won the games he should win. And Mike Tomlin, it's a mystery every single week.
Awesome. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Curt, obviously, those of you who are listening, you can find Curt's work at SteelersWire.com. It's one of our sister sites on the USA Today NFL Wire. Curt, are you on social media at all? I know, when people ask me this on other shows, I'm like, if you want to follow Cardinals content, you can find me here. But maybe there's a few listeners out there that want to get to know the Steelers or just see what's out there. Let us know. Let my listeners know how they can follow you other than just Steelers Wire.
Yeah, you can go on Twitter. I'm at Curt Popejoy SW. I don't tweet a ton, so that's not my thing. I don't tweet a whole lot. I'm more just a reader, but yeah, and it's not always football, so I'm not for everybody. So
all right.
That's the thing.
Well, Curt, I really appreciate your time. This has been our opponent preview about the Pittsburgh Steelers, whom the Cardinals play Week 13 on the road. Curt, thank you so much for your time. That'll wrap up this edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. We will be back again very soon with yet another opponent preview. Thanks for listening, as always. All right. Come on.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise up, Sea Red.
Rise